change from the advertised episode of The Bill tonight at 8. You're watching LWT.
Good evening, I'm Lindsay Charlton.
And I'm Anna Maria Ash. In London tonight, the first heavy snowfall of the winter trails chaos in its wake.
The baby abandoned in an East London park is reunited with his 15-year-old mother.
Plus, the puppies that were left to die in a dustbin.
First tonight, the first heavy snow of the winter has brought chaos to the southeast today, and it caught drivers by surprise. There were 19 separate crashes on the M25, and part of the North Circular in East London had to be shut because there were so many accidents.
Traffic organisations criticised drivers for driving too fast in treacherous conditions. The AA said many of the accidents could have been avoided if drivers had only taken more account of the conditions. Kate Harding reports.
With the first heavy snow this Christmas came traffic chaos. The M25 was the worst hit as more than an inch of snow fell by early morning. Traffic was brought to a virtual standstill, and after a spate of 19 accidents, some of the more hazardous roads in the region were closed. Motoring organisations criticised drivers for travelling too fast and ignoring weather warnings.
We've been seeing snow, which has meant people skidding, people sliding, vehicles overturning, some quite nasty accidents in places, and where it looks like just a light sprinkling of snow can actually be very deceptive because it can be a light sprinkling of snow but with ice underneath, so extremely dangerous.
On the M25 in Kent, it was the same picture, with slow-moving traffic heading towards Gatwick Airport, hampering emergency vehicles and causing long tailbacks. Elsewhere in the region, icy roads caused a number of minor accidents. In Little Birstead in Essex, this car slid off the road and landed nose first into a ditch. And treacherous conditions in Hutton led this car to a similar fate. Neither driver was seriously injured. On the A217 in Surrey, police had to come to the rescue of this motorist after the driver's car collided with a milk float. By early morning, many of the region's road gritters were out in force, others taking on the task for themselves. In central London, the roads were virtually traffic-free when heavy snow fell, clearing the way for more primitive forms of transport and for children to have their fun. But it's not all child's play. With the cold comes burst pipes. In Highbury in North London, workmen spent the day clearing up after a 10-inch water main burst in Blackstock Road, closing the street to traffic and turning the road into an ice rink. Police and motoring organisations are warning drivers to take care tonight as temperatures fall to below zero. They're asking motorists to stay at home if possible and keep out of the cold. This is Kate Harding for London Tonight.
And we'll find out what the weather has in store for us this weekend with a forecast later in the programme.
Still to come on London Tonight, what has forced a pensioner to leave the flats that have been his home for the past 47 years?
Before that, the mother who abandoned her newborn baby in an East London park has been reunited with him. After being questioned by police, she was allowed to see her child in hospital, where staff have named him Joseph. The mother is 15 years old. Liz Wickham reports.
He's come on in leaps and bounds since Christmas Eve when he was close to death. Feeding well now and out of his incubator, the abandoned baby nurses named Joseph has had the best Christmas treat ever. His mum came to see him.
We were extremely pleased to see her. It was a very brave thing she did by actually going to the police and saying that she was the baby's mum. She came in yesterday evening and I understand it was quite an emotional reunion.
Joseph had been left wrapped in a towel behind toilets in Goodmayes Park in Ilford, only 30 minutes after being born. A road sweeper found him, blue with hypothermia. He was taken to Harold Wood Hospital in Romford and kept in an incubator for 3 days. Detectives suspected that a teenager spotted near the scene was the mother, and they were concerned for her health. They were right, and last night a 15-year-old came forward to confess.
Having interviewed the mother by 2 female officers from my own team, it was established that the mother actually remained in the park and was watching baby Joseph until such time as he was found.
Does she and Grandma want to take the baby now?
Yes, they do. They very much want to care for the child.
Last night, the young mother was reunited with Joseph and given the medical care she needed.
She was seen yesterday evening while she was in the hospital, and she's now under the care of a midwife and her own GP. I think it's wonderful. It's really nice to see such a positive outcome to what seemed to be a very sad start for Christmas.
Although there are to be no criminal charges in relation to baby Joseph, it still remains for social workers to decide whether he will go home to his natural mother. In Barking, this is Liz Wickham for London Tonight.
Detectives are renewing their appeal for help to solve one of the most heartless murders of recent years. It's now 12 months since the body of Alan Holmes was found at his home in North London. He'd been tied up, tortured and robbed, and then simply left to die. This report from Christopher Peacock.
Alan Holmes' sister reliving the agony of her brother's murder 1 year on. This time last year, she'd phoned his flat in Camden to see if he was all right. There was no reply. What she didn't know was that he'd been tortured and was dying after being bound and gagged for 10 days.
When I was phoning, he was lying there. If only. I feel I just want to hide away, but as my husband said, Alan wouldn't have wanted that.
The horrors endured by Alan Holmes behind these curtains are beyond imagination. 10 days of hell. The civilian police worker was tied to his bed so he couldn't move, beaten and tortured, starved and denied water so his body dehydrated. A barbaric death for £1,000. 1 year on, the police are no nearer to finding his killer.
I have to say, I'm gravely disappointed that the person responsible hasn't been caught. I've always been convinced that the person who did it has told somebody about it, and it's those people, or that person, that I would appeal to today, a year later, to come forward.
The alarm had been raised at Kentish Town Police Station after Mr. Holmes failed to return to his job at the garage there after Christmas. He died after his attacker forced him to give up the PIN numbers of 2 bank accounts.
The person feels they've got away with it, and they may do it again. And that would be just terrible for some other family, you know. So from that point of view, I think this person should be put away.
A murder riddle that remains unsolved, possibly because it happened over the Christmas holiday when few people were about and there were no witnesses. A year on, his family hope that someone somewhere will have a conscience to give police the clue that will lead to the killer. This is Christopher Peacock for London Tonight.
Reports today have claimed that jazzman Ronnie Scott may have committed suicide. Mr. Scott was found dead at his home in London on Monday. He was 69. The cause of death isn't known and a post-mortem examination will be held next Monday. The reports claim Scott attempted suicide twice before, that he'd been depressed recently because dental surgery left him unable to play the saxophone.
It's been revealed today that Mandy Allwood, who lost the 8 babies she was expecting following fertility treatment, has been arrested by police. Miss Allwood, who has bought a house in Wimbledon with the proceeds of the sale of her story, was questioned about alleged fraud offences. She was interviewed in her hometown of Solihull and bailed to return to police there in February.
The traditional Christmas warning that dogs shouldn't be given as presents has been ignored again. And once again, Battersea Dogs Home is picking up the pieces, as Damon Green reports.
It's enough to make any dog lover weep. These Labrador puppies found dumped in a dustbin and left to die on Christmas Eve. But it's a sadly common tale in South London. They're just 2 of nearly 3 dozen abandoned pups brought to Battersea Dogs Home this Christmas. Normally the home has 400 residents, but once again the festive season and the pups bought as unwanted presents have swelled that figure by over 200. That's in spite of pleas not to buy pets as Christmas gifts. And now staff are bracing themselves for another batch of animals dumped on the doorstep.
Coming into January, we will probably see an increase in puppies in particular. When children are back at school, things are going back to normal, mum's got to go to work, you know, things in the house are getting back to normal. I hope it won't happen, but I think, you know, maybe we will see an increase.
Today the home opened its doors to would-be owners. It says it'll have no problem finding homes for the younger dogs. The puppies are always snapped up, but for older animals there are often no takers. Rebel here has been waiting for a new home since Christmas last year.
Animal welfare groups are hoping that one year the message about buying puppies for Christmas will get through. But for this little fella, it's already too late. In Battersea Dogs Home, this is Damon Green for London Tonight.
And if you think you could give a dog a decent home, then Battersea Dogs Home is open all over the weekend. Do contact them. Lindsay.
Now the story of one man's battle to stay in the home he loves. Brian Seeley-Clark is being evicted from his council flat in Camden, which has been his home for the past 47 years. Every other tenant in the block moved out long ago for renovation work to go ahead. But as James Birtles now reports, Brian has resisted all attempts to make him move until now.
What a terrible mess.
Among the rubble and building works, Brian Seeley-Clark lives a life under virtual siege. The other tenants moved out 2 years ago when renovations started, but he lives alone, the only remaining resident of a block which is now virtually an empty shell.
It's a little creepy at night and that sort of thing, but there are certain I believe in being positive, always find the bright side, and you certainly don't get complaints from your neighbours if you make a noise, and you get no problems. It's just creepy and rather lonely.
He moved in as a young man in 1949, then a keen socialiser, even mixing with royalty. He's pictured here with the Queen's late cousin. Still a bachelor, he's not only been battling ill health, but Camden Council attempts to move him to a flat which he says is just too small. Only now, with a court order against him, is this lone figure of defiance preparing to leave the home he loves.
Emotional. I've got to admit it, yeah. I'm going to be terribly sad. I mean, the memories you can imagine over 47 years here, it's going to be very heartbreaking, but you've got to do it.
This proud pensioner, who's just turned 72, moves into his new council flat, also in Camden, next month, facing a new year with new fears for the future.
I don't think I could be more worried. I really don't. My whole future is too horrific to contemplate, and I'm afraid I'm the sort of character who, when I can't face something, I just turn my back on it and pretend it's not going to happen.
The sad tale of one man's fight to stay in the home he loves. When we come back, though,
a Christmas mystery. Whatever happened to the West End's winter sales stampede?
And welcome back.
Still to come on the programme, festive snow beat the bookies. Now it's taking its toll on the Christmas fixture list. We'll have the latest on what's not on later.
But before that, whatever did happen to the West End's winter sales stampede? Years past have seen nearly every shop bursting with bargain hunters. Not so today, however, when most stores open their doors, as Richard Gaisford now reports.
An hour before the start, plenty of snow, but hardly a bargain hunter in sight. Eventually they came in dribs and drabs, amongst them Margaret Fahy, a veteran of the sales who stood in line each year since the war.
Years ago we used to have a band here on it, and you had the music and the queues used to go down round the corner years ago, you know. Look at it this morning.
At the stroke of 9, the doors flew open and in traditional style, the crowds rushed in. Well, they walked briskly anyway, hardly the chaos of sales gone by.
Well, those were in the days when you have a TV for 10 pence and a Coke for 25p. I think today that sort of thing has largely changed, and a store like Selfridges now tends to have bargains right across the whole store, because those sort of bargains that you're alluding to, 4 or 5 people would get them and the rest of the queue would feel highly miffed.
But as the snow clouds cleared, the shopping crowds breezed in. You could easily imagine being stuck in a time warp, trapped in the crush of pre-Christmas shopping. No longer though a blitz on Buzz Lightyears, now it's the dash for a discount.
Well, despite a slow and cold start this morning, business is certainly hotting up here on the streets of the West End this afternoon. In fact, shopkeepers reckon a festive feel-good factor is going to bring them record profits.
When our scarf department's doing well, we know the store is busy. You just have to look at the crowds, and as you can see, it's a pretty successful sale, so we're very happy.
And with the West End trend towards slightly lower discounts on more goods, it seems everyone's in with a chance of finding a bargain this year, even if you have missed the first official day of the sales. In central London, this is Richard Gaisford for London Tonight.
Staying with the winter sales, there's been a warning today to Londoners that a surge in summer holiday bookings could mean a shortage for latecomers. Travel agents say the rush is because brochures were published in July, earlier than ever before. Or are they just trying to avoid being burned, left with too many holidays on their hands? Paul Moss has been finding out.
We're all going on a summer holiday.
It's not a bad marketing ploy. Just as Londoners are busy freezing their socks off, the travel agents step in and give a shock warning. Forget last-minute bargains, they say. Tour companies may actually run out of summer holidays in 1997.
There are less holidays on the market than there were a couple of years ago, and obviously there's still the people that want to take the holidays. Some people have more disposable income, and so they want to take a holiday. You always get first-time holiday makers, so there are more people out in the market to buy.
Actually, nobody was buying a holiday while we were filming. Still, Thomas Cook is still recommending to people that they buy their holiday now to avoid disappointment later. Not everyone is convinced.
Every year, holiday companies try to panic consumers into booking early. Realistically, if you've got small children and you want to go away in the summer holidays and you know where you want to go, then book now when you can get the discounts. But if you're relaxed, you're flexible, you don't mind where you want to go, just want a bit of sun, there's always something that's around later on in the year.
Of course, one genuine growth industry these days is winter holidays. For those too impatient to wait and enough money not to have to, catching the sun's rays is something you can do all year round. And it's not all that difficult to get there in a hurry, providing you know how. Somewhere in the tropics, this is Paul Moss for London Tonight.
How did he do that?
Miracle of television.
That's what it is. Another miracle now, all the sports news. There's sport in this.
There is some sport, Anna Maria, yes. The cold weather has bitten into the weekend sporting programme, so let's get right up to date with the matches off. And the Division 1 game between Crystal Palace and Stoke was one of the first to be postponed. Protective covers not enough to save the pitch, so Selhurst Park beaten by the cold for the second time in 3 days. And nothing for him to watch tomorrow, I'm afraid. Nor indeed for Luton or Wickham fans. Their Division 2 match at Kenilworth Road is also off. And there are inspections already scheduled tomorrow for the games involving Millwall, Watford, Fulham and Leyton Orient. As I mentioned, the Boxing Day match at Selhurst Park between Wimbledon and West Ham was postponed, but the rest of our sides made it through 90 minutes, some better than others.
Results earlier in the day went their way, but Arsenal failed to take advantage, staying 3 points behind leaders Liverpool. The Gunners beat Wednesday 4-1 earlier in the season, but Dennis Bergkamp's effort on the hour was one of the few highlights of this drab encounter. Gianfranco Zola has chosen the festive period to unveil his vast array of skills, the perfect Christmas present for Chelsea. The little Italian twice took advantage of seasonal generosity by Villa keeper Mark Bosnich. Italy doing the trick for Chelsea, but Spurs are getting their inspiration from Northern Europe. Swede Stefan Iversen bagged his first brace, while fellow Scandinavian Dane Alan Nielsen clinched it in the second half with this header. Palace's Division 1 promotion push lost more ground with this 3-1 defeat at Portman Road. Dean Gordon's penalty not enough to save the Eagles. QPR are now just 2 points behind Palace in 6th after victory over Norwich. New signing Gavin Peacock set them on their way, and they survived this howler by keeper Tony Roberts before young Australian Andrew McDermott wrapped up the points 5 minutes from time. Terry Venables take note. Southend's relegation problems deepened with defeat by Charlton at Roots Hall. Goals by Mark Kinsella and John Robinson means it's now 5 games without a win for the Essex side. A Boxing Day trip to deepest Devon wasn't ideal for Brentford, but the result was spot on. 3 goals in the last 20 minutes set up a pleasant long journey home. The Bees are joined by the Hatters in a breakaway at the top of Division 2. Luton are 5 points clear in second place, and Tony Thorpe is a big reason why. 2 more against Gillingham take his season's tally to 18. In Division 3, Fulham are still sitting pretty, 4 points clear, despite dropping 2 points to lowly Exeter. The match was a one-man show for Fulham defender Terry Angus, who scored at both ends in an unexpected 1-1 draw.
Harlequins have taken positive steps today in their bid to return to the top of Rugby Union's Courage League. They've signed French goal-kicking standoff Thierry Lacroix in a 2.5-year deal worth an estimated £250,000. The 29-year-old international and top point scorer in last year's World Cup will make his debut in the London derby against Wasps on Sunday week. He joins two other Frenchmen at the Twickenham club, Quins' early season captures Laurent Caban and Laurent Benazet. Lacroix, who has chalked up 367 points in 38 internationals, has been playing in South Africa. Well, as 96 comes to an end, with the reflections of three of Britain's biggest names in sport, who will all remember the year for very different reasons. Simon Moore begins our review with the man who's been at the pinnacle of English rugby for almost a decade.
1996 saw the sun set on England's most successful rugby captain. Will Carling stepped down at the end of a victorious Five Nations campaign.
Charles was not arguing.
But rugby's dominant drama was played out in the committee room. With the domestic game still coming to terms with professionalism, the Rugby Football Union was in dispute with the newly formed club organisation EPRUC over who should control the sport and how money from television rights should be handed out. Agreement was finally reached, but at what price?
I don't think it's been great for rugby. I think a lot of people looked at the sport and thought, what on earth is going on? Can't they sort out what doesn't seem to be a particularly tricky problem on the outside? And I think there's been a lot of vested interest, maybe egos and things have got in the way, with all the negotiation.
Britain's best struggled to compete with the world's best at the Olympic Games in Atlanta. Only Steve Redgrave and Matthew Pinsent managed Sport's ultimate prize. Redgrave receives a hero's welcome after his fourth successive gold, but the rest of our athletes returned home to face more critical media music. Sally Gunnell was one who missed out, injury cruelly robbing her of the chance to defend her Olympic title. But our most successful Essex girl says that things really aren't that bad.
What was sad was sort of the reports that we were getting back, and when you hear about the TV and everything, everyone's sort of like saying, the journalists saying, oh, you're doing so badly, but you know that there's people out there that are running British records and are getting to finals and winning medals, which maybe wasn't predicted sort of things. It was just literally that very, very top layer of those gold medals that we were missing.
The most memorable moment of the summer was Euro 96, when football came home and England came within a couple of kicks of another major Wembley final. 6 months after captain Tony Adams led the nation in its search for glory, the Arsenal captain took his club side to the top of the Premiership. His roller coaster year also included treatment for alcohol addiction. But Captain Courageous is winning the battle.
We had a tremendous Euro 96 that I gave it my all. And that was a really nice memory, and very optimistic about the future, football in terms and personally. So a lot to look forward to.
Good to see Tony Adams smiling there, but no laughing matter for England's cricketers, I'm afraid. When rain washed out play on the second day of the second test in Harare, Zimbabwe were 93 for 2 in reply to England's somewhat disappointing 156 all out.
Somewhat.
Not very good, is it?
Bit of an understatement that, I think. Yes. Time now for a look at the news headlines from around Britain and the world tonight. The family of a British nurse working in Saudi Arabia have protested her innocence. Lucille McLaughlin's family say she's not capable of murder. McLaughlin faces a public beheading in Saudi Arabia if she's found guilty of killing colleague Yvonne Guilford.
Riot police were called in to disperse a crowd of 60,000 protesters who gathered in Belgrade's Republic Square. The protesters are angry about President Slobodan Milosevic's decision to ignore the results of local elections held more than 5 weeks ago.
And as the first heavy snow hits Britain, the government is coming under increasing pressure to announce cold weather payments. Labour claims nearly 1 million pensioners entitled to the payments are missing out on help with bills and may not be using the heating in their homes.
The British yachtsman Pete Goss has rescued a French sailor during a round-the-world race. Raphael de Nelly managed to cling to the hull of his upturned yacht, which was pounded by heavy seas off the West Australian coast. Goss will be compensated for the time he's lost in the race.
And that was a look at the international weather. Let's have a look at international news. Let's have a look at our weather tonight. More snow, perhaps? Here's Martin.
I don't think so. I think we've had the worst of the snow, or maybe I should say the best of the snow. We have to be careful how we talk about snow. I'm sure there's a few 100,000 of our younger viewers out there who think it's wonderful stuff, and I have to agree with them, I think, especially this time of year. If we can't cope with a couple of flakes of snow at Christmas, then it's a poor thing, isn't it? But if you do have to travel around, you'll be pleased to hear that the worst of the snow is over, and the outlook for the next 24 hours or so is basically dry, but really quite cold weather. There's a satellite picture. You can see most of Britain was dry and bright today. The southeast was really the exception with this patch of cloud. There's high pressure to the north there, that's why the skies are clear, and that high pressure is going to keep us mostly dry over the next couple of days. But the patch of cloud that produced the snow this morning moved away to the south and east very slowly, and overnight tonight, for a while at least, it's likely to come back from that direction, moving across to the west. Now this time there'll be just the odd flake of snow, or perhaps more likely sleet, I think, as it goes through the night, and then hopefully tomorrow we'll see one or two breaks in the cloud coming down from the north and the east, so brighter weather but staying quite cold. Tonight then, in more detail, at the moment there are still some clear spells around, and so temperatures are falling quite quickly, down below freezing for a while this evening, and so frost in places and therefore one or two icy patches on the roads. But as the clouds thicken up again from the east later in the night, we may well see one or two little bits of sleet, but no more than that. And then tomorrow morning, rather a grey start to the day, and certainly a cold start. Temperatures only around 2 degrees and a very chilly northeasterly breeze, so a cold start to the day. But gradually, I think, we'll see the clouds begin to break from the northeast, and as it goes through into the afternoon, it's going to be a little bit brighter and a fraction warmer, but a top temperature only 3, and another cold but fairly bright day on Sunday after yet another frosty night. Mind how you go on the roads.
Thank you, Martin. Well, the winter weather we've had so far is probably more than enough for one horse in Essex. Fire crews were called overnight to a riding school near Epping to help the horse after she had a little trouble underfoot. The 32-year-old mare called Cornflake slipped on ice after being let out for a Christmas trot around her paddock and couldn't get up. It took fire crews 3 hours to get her back on her feet.
And we hear that Cornflakes is doing well now. Finally, we leave you with more pictures of today's snowfall. But these are happier scenes of the winter weather, which came as a bonus to children and their parents. Bye-bye.